gentlemen, it is time for prize fighters, circus freaks, and gangsters. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Greta.
And we are super pumped to talk about the 19th century. The dirtiest, the filthiest, the coolest, the nastiest, and the weirdest century that I might know about.
I have nothing to add to that. Good God.
Today we're on Season 2, Episode 9 of the epic Max TV show Warrior. This episode is entitled Enter the Dragon, which I consider to be a completely incorrect titling of this episode, but we can go into that later.
All the same, I was like, okay, with a title like that, there had better be some cool fights. Brett Chan, who's the fight coordinator, has got to be like the hardest working fight coordinator in the TV biz right now. He better be showing some stuff in this one.
Yeah, see, so this episode is called Enter the Dragon. The next one is called Fist of Fury, as I recall, which is another name for Chinese Connection, or it's called Chinese Connection, which is...
No, it's The Man on the Wall is the next episode.
Yes, but it's a picture of the Chinese Connection thing. And this episode should have been called Chinese Connection because it is exactly Chinese Connection, which popularized the nunchuck. And so, I just have a real problem with this because this is where we see the nunchuck, and it was just misnamed. I really have a problem with it. But I'm going to forgive these people. Shall we begin?
Well, yes, because there is somebody who is even more miserable than you with the mistitling of all of these episodes, and that would be Jacob.
That is, between the mistitling of this episode and the possible non-bonneted young lady in this episode.
Oh, my misery is unbounded about that.
The two of us might need to take some Paxil after this.
So, yes, we get, this is a TikTok video now. Point of view, Jacob.
Point of view of a person murdering somebody else.
Right.
But instead of running down bicyclists, Jacob kills a mayor. And he kills a mayor with a candlestick in the foyer. And we've already seen this in the last episode, but he now it's just from Jacob's perspective. And then
now we see it from the end of the fireplace tool, and we sort of see, okay, what little Penny can do, no one is thinking, except maybe Penny realizes that if she keeps Jacob in the house, she's super effed. So she's like, yeah, get out. We don't have the thing of my home is my palace kind of thing. I'm super famous, so no police can come in here. It's, in fact, the opposite.
Well, yeah, especially since neither of those two people are legally human beings, according to American law. So they are both screwed because there's a dead legal human being a white male in the house. And now these two non-humans, these subhumans, are responsible for the death of this glorious white man who has tragically been cast down and he's cut down in his prime. It's a tragedy.
He's rich and elected. You're right.
And
he's
white.
Like a triple threat.
Yeah, there is nothing that they can do to win this situation. So she gives him money for a train to Santa Fe. It gives him half of her money. And then he goes and he brings his mom medicine and gives her the money and then, tells her that he gives her half the money.
He's got to go.
Yeah. Penny gives him all the money.
Be back.
He gives his mom half the money, and then he's going to take the rest of it to get to China.
And it was one of those things where, you're in trouble, but you don't have the ability to see the big picture. And so he's just thinking in these tiny little increments. Like, if he were thinking clearly, he would just get the hell out of there. But the way it goes from dark to like full morning, and these police have had time to print up the flyers with his face on it. Like, he stayed there for a while, but that's super typical of people who sort of find themselves in these like really desperate situations. They start concentrating on just the weirdest small little things that are important to them in the moment.
Well, and where the hell is he going to go? If he leaves Chinatown, he's a marked man because he's a Chinese person. He is dressed like a coolie, so he stands out even in Chinatown against everybody else. Like, he has no way to disguise himself, and it's just like, he looks exactly like John Chinaman. He could be any Chinese man. So he could be picked up on any number of crimes at this point.
Right. So, yeah, he's not thinking, but like, even if he were thinking, what could he do? Like, yeah. So, yeah, there's a big flashing red light going on. Too late, too late, too late.
Yeah, yeah, and I really so he gets in this basement and he's hiding. And did you really love the little Ratatouille rat? Like, it looked like that rat was going to wear a chef's hat and he was going to cook some food. That was the cleanest.
I was like, that was the most.
That was the cleanest rat has ever been in anything ever.
Adorable, well.
That was a sterile rat.
Well-fed, happy little rat, like somebody keeps in their pocket. Absolutely.
Yeah. That is not a rat who ends a sentence in a preposition. Like, he has a top hat and monocle, that rat.
That rat says 8.
So Jacob's down there collecting water in a tin cup, like hiding in this basement, and the cops are tearing the city apart.
Yes.
But, so he breaks into Chow's, which is stupid. And he pays the price for that stupidity.
Yes, but there's a great exchange between them when Chow takes his money and he's like, yeah, you're walking around with this much money? Yeah, that'll get you killed. But he makes him the deal. He's like, well, I can get you to China, but in a coffin. And he objects, like, oh my God, no, I can't go to China in a coffin. And Chow says, you can stay here in a coffin.
Now, so Chow has a guy on board to let him out of this coffin. However,
supposedly,
in this era, there was the King of Prussia at the time was a very...
Yeah, you told me about this. Yeah.
His people kidnap tall men from all over Europe. They would get them drunk. Once they passed out, they would nail them into a coffin and ship them back to Germany in a coffin. They would be going from like St. Petersburg, Russia to Germany in a coffin the entire way.
I wonder what the success rate of that was. I mean, if you're stuck flat on your back too and you wake up like from a super terrible drunk, like how many of these guys did a John Bonham and just choked on their own vomit? I mean, for starters.
Not only that, but yeah, just for starters, not beating themselves to death on the inside of the thing. A lot of them had acromegaly, and they couldn't treat that at the time. So, so these guys had horrible health problems associated with their great height, and they're trapped in a box.
And they don't know what's going on. I mean, how many of them just died of fright?
So there was a fate worse than Jacob, I guess, in this time period. Yeah, because the 19th century is nothing if not a house of horrors.
I guess.
But he doesn't have to worry about that because Chow sells him out and he ends up getting lynched basically immediately.
Yes. And, it was one of those things. I'm like, I can see this coming. And it's sort of reminding us that as much of a fantasy as this show always was, and then definitely became in the second season, you are Chinese in San Francisco Chinatown right as all of the froth whipping up to the Chinese Exclusion Act is happening. And so you're like, he's not going to get saved. He can't get saved. There were so many people who were not saved.
No, because Buckley wants him and would pay for him. Mai Ling wants him, would pay for him. I mean, there's so many people who would pay to have this man dead just so that the cops will start tearing Chinatown to the ground, which is understandable. Right. And so I didn't think this man was going to make it to China. I'm sure you didn't think he was going to make it to China. He couldn't have thought he was going to make it into China. There's no way I would have gotten into that box. But I would have ridden a donkey to Mexico.
But as you said, like he was like, I didn't have any other way out, so he'll do anything at that point. Yeah.
And then Lee is immediately suspicious because he's like, all right, O'Hara, how the hell did you know, out of all these coffins, that there was going to be a live Chinese dude in that coffin?
In that one.
How did you know that? And O'Hara's like, yeah, don't worry about that.
So, the paranoia is just starting to, like, rise up through Lee. You can just sort of see it coming up. Like, he's just, like, his grasp on the world is just starting to get more and more tenuous. Like, everything that's supposed to be the way it's supposed to be is just, he's just coming apart.
See, I would characterize it a different way. I would say that he's starting to realize that he's the only one not on the take, and that everybody around him is corrupt as shit, and that there's no point to what he's doing. He is exhibiting nobility for no reason whatsoever and just getting his ass kicked over and over for it.
Very true. I'm just, like all of that's true, but I just feel like his perceptions are like extra screwed up. So some people would sort of see that and have like a sane realization. I feel like he's having sort of these kind of insane fractured thoughts. Like he's kind of flying apart.
He is self-medicating with opium and cocaine, so there is there is that.
So, like, he's in a, this is the hardest kind of person to sort of talk down from their paranoia or their upset or their just like really fractured view of the world, is when they're kind of right. Like, they're not feeling this way for no reason. They actually have a good reason to feel like everybody's against them.
Oh, here we go. Now you're feeding conspiracy theories. All right. Let's pump the brakes, shall we?
That's what I'm saying. These are the hardest people to talk down if they're a little bit right. It's just like their reactions go way off the deep end. And you're like, no, come back to reality. Come back. It's like, but I was right about this one thing. And you're like, but that doesn't mean you're right about everything else. Oh, God.
But one thing Chow and Mai Ling are right about is that this does, it is intended to save Chinatown, and they have the idea that if they sell Jacob out, then everything will be all right, and the cops will start breaking their shops down. They'll be able to go back to business. But no, the Irish mob wants to lynch Jacob. They don't even let the cops get this man to the jail.
No.
And it was clever. They go up, they stand in front of the horses so the carriage can't go forward. Then they just unhitch the carriage and lead the horses away. Now what are the cops going to do? That was a clever move. It must have been like an old-timey bank robbing move or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to say that felt like a bank robber, stagecoach kind of like
stagecoach robbery. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So they and then they just they string him right up.
Yeah, it's sort of like the police didn't really kind of think this through, that they were going to take this guy right by the Banshee, or alternately, some of those cops are like, yeah, we'll just take this guy by the Banshee and he'll be off our hands. Who knows at this point?
Meanwhile, Leary's he wakes up and he and Sophie start day drinking because they're like, this has been the worst fucking week ever.
Right?
Which I would like to point out is entirely their fault. The two of them caused all of this. So these two are bemoaning the lives that they have created. And then Leary looks around and he's like, there's nobody in this fucking bar.
What the hell's going on? Yeah.
And this is an Irish bar. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Where are all the drunk Irishmen at 10 o'clock in the morning? And he goes outside, finds them all outside, lynching a Chinese man.
Yeah, Sophie's having a moment where she's like, oh shit, I've done something that I can't take back. Or I can't sweep under the rug. And I kind of feel like, this is the first time that's happened to her. And boy, did she pick a doozy for that. So yeah, definitely day drinking.
Yeah, she wanders out there to find Leary and then sees all of her hard work has come to fruition. I mean, it's too bad the penny wasn't strung up next to him just so she could have had all of that regret at once. But she'll be able to really ramp up the regret soon because she has created as many problems for the people around her. Like, it is a bad time knowing that woman. Leary needs to get the hell away from her, and he is not a great guy.
And Sophie, goes into full not thinking this through. This lone woman walking out into this screaming throng of semi-drunk but extremely adrenaline-rushed Irishmen. No, stop! And Leary's like, I gotta get you out of here.
Yeah, well, she also got smacked down. I thought he was just going to start killing people in the crowd, but then he just sends her away and calls her a tourist, which is such an old school, punk way to cast somebody out. It was, I know in the punk scene, especially with gutter punks, they used to always call the suburban kids who would come down and pretend to be gutter punks, they would call them tourists.
Tourists, okay.
And, and we would just beat up all of them as hardcore kids. But yeah.
It's the punk version of poser.
We didn't discriminate. We just beat them up. But the punk kids really did not like, and the tourists really hated being called tourists. So the suburban kids really take great offense to that. And I think that was probably whatever the 19th century version of that was. It probably would have cut her at the knees.
Oh yeah. But yeah, Leary starts to get it together and he's like, oh, this is going to be bad. I can't stop this. So how can I survive it? That's where his brain goes, wham.
Yeah. And meanwhile, he's like, and I'm surrounded by all these fucking idiots who are now they're completely out of control. So he has And there's no real way to get control of it.
No. And O'Hara sees this too, and he kind of realizes, like, I can't stop this. I know, because they kind of, like, the mob kind of has that feeling that there's no consequences, because there more or less hasn't been for the Irish picking on the Chinese. So, yeah, like, this whole thing, like, when there are not consequences, people are always going to take that extra step until they're taking that extra mile, and then stopping them when they've gone that far overboard, you're like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, you see this now with people, or like with communities not caring about black on black crime in the inner cities and things like. It's exactly the same thing. I mean, this one might as well be black on black, because it's Chinese and Irish, two people that were considered to be foreign and thus lesser than at this time. So this riot kicks off, and it's really interesting that the riot that they built in this episode like goes. It draws on two separate riots that happened in L.A. and San Francisco in history. One of them happened in the 1850s. That's the one where you get, like, the basis for this riot, because it was over a woman who was, like, in sexual slavery, and then a rancher got involved, and he got killed, and then this riot broke out, an anti-Chinese riot. And then there was another one, and like, I think 20 people got lynched on the first day. 20 Chinese people got lynched on the first day in that one. It was a bad riot. The one that happened in 1877 was a 3-day pogrom against the Chinese, but only 4 people died. So this would have been the one that would be contemporaneous roughly with this show.
Right. But you get...
The way that they got the cops away from the rioters, though, in real life was better than the show. Because what they did was they went down to the docks. They had a coal dock, and they dumped 100 barrels of whale oil on the coal and set it on fire.
Whoa!
And I know you know whale oil, so I was so excited to tell you that.
Whoa! Yeah. And San Francisco was a big whaling port, because at this point, kerosene hadn't been invented yet in 1850, or if it had been invented, it wasn't widespread. It was like some crazy lab project. And so that was the portable oil that everybody was putting in their, like, hurricane lamps, their glass bottom lamps that had, like, the curvy glass on the top.
So this is 19th century gasoline, basically.
Yeah.
They poured 100 barrels of 19th century gasoline on coal and then set it on fire.
Oh my God.
So now the whole city's blanketed in this coal smoke, and they were rioting under the cover of that. And it caused... It cost, just on the docks alone, it was $500,000 worth of damage in 19th century money, so it's like $14 million.
I was going to say,
and then they did another $2.5 million of damage to laundries. They just destroyed every Chinese laundry they could get.
Right, because, they're all going to be kind of in the same place. Oh, my, gee,
Yeah.
And that's wild.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and remember, Mai Ling just invested in a Chinese laundry, so we sort of got just a little flavor of sort of that.
Oh, that is nice, especially because the original riot in 1877 was the Working Man's Party of California, which I will get to later, but it wasn't initially like super anti-Chinese, but this anti-Chinese faction showed up, and they started agitating everybody, and then they saw a Chinese guy walking by, beat the shit out of him, and then the riot started. Then they burned the docks, and then they went crazy, burning down all the laundries.
And this is sort of the thing about anybody who wants power. They take a group that's already sort of formed, and then they find some issue or some trigger where they can get everybody really whipped up. Even if the people who started the group are like, hey, we've got some good ideas, we want to make the world a better place, and then somebody comes in and goes, those damn Chinese, they're taking our germs.
Well, especially because they were in the middle of their long depression, so it was 1873 to the 1896. Everybody was moving west for work. Because all the industry on the East Coast had fallen apart, and grain prices had dropped. This was a global depression. So Britain was falling apart because grain prices had dropped, because we started growing grain in the prairies. And
Erie Canal, all that,
And when all that happened, railroads started collapsing in the United States. So 89 railroads went out of business in the 1870s.
Holy cow. I knew there was consolidation, but...
Yeah, and so all the people who were... Yeah, so that's why they hated the Asian people. They were fighting over these few jobs that were left as all these companies like promised them the world and then vanished.
It is a very sort of like another version of like move fast and break things. Will bring everybody in because those railroads had sold all those shares, so that was sort of like the VC capital of the day, and so they're just throwing money, throwing parties, hiring people like crazy, and then you get to the end of your runway and you're like, well, I got my mansion in railroad and I don't need to buy.
Yeah.
Toodles. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you still want a job? Why am I even talking to you anymore? You're a poor.
Yeah, you're a poor. You're gross.
Yeah, no, and this is 100% everything that's starting to really feed into the growing labor movement. And so the Working Man's Party is all part of that. But, you start out with like, how can I make the world a better place? And somebody says, I just want to hit people. I just want power over people and go smash things. Yeah,
and I think because it wasn't very clear in the description that I read, but there were two working man parties in California. One of them was founded in California, and it was the Working Man's Party of California.
Sure.
They were both founded in California, but the Working Man's Party of the United States, one was founded in LA, the other was in San Francisco. And the Working Man's Party of the United States was based mostly on the East Coast. But they were the ones who started this this meeting in this sandlot. And then the Working Man's Party of California came in and started the agitation. And what happened after this is that the Working Man Party of the United States just went to the East Coast and said, fuck California. And they folded all the former Working Man's Party people in California into that one. And it only made sense to me as we were talking about it.
Okay. Yeah, that does make sense. I mean,
it's difficult to follow.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, you hate Game of Thrones and other political machinations, and yet, here we are.
Yeah, my God, this is way more complicated than I ever expected it to be.
Well, you know what's simple? When a mob starts running into Chinatown and Lee loses his goddamn mind and chases after him, and O'Hara just says, God damn it, Lee, and you can't let him go down.
That man has so many head injuries now, and he's probably got a nose, like just a head full of cocaine. He is out to kill as many people as he can.
And it's almost like he's not quite sure why he's doing what he's doing, but he's like, you can't let this mob run riot, so I'll go stop. Yeah, he is not talking about not thinking clearly. But yeah,
yes, one man versus a mob. But it's not just one man, because the Fong Hai and the Long Z team up. We finally get the team up I've been waiting for. Li Yong and Ah Sahm fighting back to back, fucking up everybody. It is glorious.
Yes, yeah, because Wang Chao and Mai Ling are like, oh God, okay, we thought we could throw one Christian to the lions and it would be bad. They're like, there's no door on the lions. Did you know that? And the Irish are just in there. They are destroying this place.
Yeah, and he has the greatest line too. Young Jun, he says, "We spend every minute of the day living in their world. Yes. Now they're going to die in ours." Oh, it's so hard.
Yes. And so, and it really is, because the cops were like, well, we'll just let this burn out. We can't stop it, so we're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, we'll let them kill each other and we'll go in and pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and the Tongs are like, no. This is like the one piece of land we have, and this is the one time we can go and kick all your asses without a lot of repercussions, or maybe none. Maybe the police.
Well, they make the great calculation that if they dice them, they're going to send the. Young Jun says if we dice them, they're going to send the army.
Yeah.
And then Ah Sahm says if we don't, they're going to send the army anyway.
Right.
And so he's like, we're going to have our ship burned down and get shot at by the army regardless. Let's go kill some people.
Right. And the look that Li Yong and Ah Sahm give each other was beautiful. They're like, yeah, we have a beef, but let's go mess some people up together. We're down.
Yep. And while they have teamed up, so have Mai Ling and Ah Toy, which is amazing. Ah Toy is just wrecked from her fight with Hammer and Cleaver. And
she gets to do the best delivery of "You should have seen the other guy."
oh yeah, that was amazing. Shit, that was so badass.
I guess I won the fight, and yes, she is just messed up. And Mai Ling, she's gonna help out Ah Toy. But let's talk for a second about the shirt progression of Ah Sahm through Chinatown.
I did not notice a shirt progression.
So we start with he's in his jacket, then his jacket comes off, and he just has the vest, or no, he just has the vest on at the start, and then his vest comes off, and that's when he gets his nunchucks.
Oh, his nunchucks. Oh, yeah, because I did notice his shirt tails were out for the first time in this show, and I don't know why that was noticeable to me, but I guess it was noticeable to you as well. So so I did notice it. I just I wasn't sure what you were talking about initially. But yeah, he busts out the nunchucks. We get Ah Sahm and the nunchucks, and the reason why he pulled his shirt tails out was so that he could echo Bruce Lee in the Chinese Connection, which is the movie that introduced the nunchuck to the world, because it was not a popular fighting implement in any place ever. It was,
yeah, it's really funny to me.
I did some research.
Working in 19th century and earlier, just like food and farming and everything, I'm like, that was developed from a grain flail. That's like an actual harvest tool. Like when you're trying to get the husks off of grain, like that's a grain flail that's been repurposed.
Yeah, it's that one's called a tabak toyok.
Okay.
And yeah, it threshes rice. There was a fighting implement that was used by the Shirongs, who were they were also known as the Wusun. They were in Xinjiang. They were the oasis culture. They were white people who lived in China, in Western China, and they were this oasis culture of Iranian nomads. And they did use it on horseback, which that makes sense. It's a great weapon for horseback. But one thing that I learned as a kid from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is that this weapon generates more force than any other weapon except for a bullet. It is equal to, if you get hit with a nunchuck, it is equivalent to being shot with a Colt 1911 or a 0.5 gram TNT explosion.
Whoa. So did you know
So you get hit in the head with a nunchuck and you die. That's what happens.
Yeah. So did you know in some countries they had to change Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because they weren't allowed to have him having nunchucks?
That makes sense. They're illegal as all fucking hell.
Yeah.
And a kid could really hurt themselves using them.
Yes. Yeah. But anyway, Ah Sahm starts out with the watching the wrong hand trick and just punches the guy at first, that was fun. I appreciated that.
Yeah, yeah. And then he hits 4 people in the face, most of them twice, and later he hit about 10 to 15 more in the face. These people would have died instantly. Their heads would have been caved in, but he just kept smacking these people with these nunchucks, which I found fascinating. It's the only thing in this TV show that, other than the bonnet situation, which I understand is egregious.
Yes.
But I feel like this is probably on the level, well, maybe just below the bonnet situation, but in terms of believability.
But but there was just something about the way that it was super staged and he was doing all of this. I'm like, they're putting in this moment of like Bruce Lee love, just like this moment of kind of levity before things just get so bad. Yeah.
Well, he had to be able to show off his nunchuck skills,
right? Which
are definitely impressive. And while that's going on, Chow's in there protecting Mai Ling, who's sewing up Ah Toy. Chow and the Giant Man, who I think has remained unnamed to this point. That giant.
And I do love that Mai Ling just calls him the ridiculously large man.
Yeah. Whatever's happening downstairs, Chow and that ridiculously large man can handle it.
Right, because Ah Toy's like, I gotta get up, and she's like, look, they'll either fix it or they'll be up here soon enough and then you can face them. So lie down and just let me deal.
And right after that, the bouncer does one of the nastiest kills I've ever seen. It was like, this was like a Jason Voorhees kill. He uses like Tai Chi / Chin Na takedown, and he's using a wrist lock on him. gets the guy face down on the ground, pulls his arm up behind his back. You think he's going to break his arm. He grabs the other arm, and he puts his foot in the guy's back, dislocates both his shoulders, and then wrenches it back even further and breaks his back. It's nasty.
That one caught me a little off guard. I was like, whoa, back in the Civil War tent again. Yeah.
It was amazing. And so, to this point, we've had on screen probably 80 murders in this riot, and I would just like to reiterate that in real life, only 4 people died in the 1877 riot. But this is just for funsies. I'm sure thousands died of infections afterwards, though. I mean that 4 doesn't count all the people who died in the week afterwards.
or is that 4 just the men that they counted, and all of the sort of people that weren't worth counting? Who knows?
Yeah, that was probably 4 white men died, and then 4 rich white men died, and then who knows about the rest?
Yeah, but we get a little bit of like guns and knives, sort of Jackie Chan style kitchen fighting in between the sheets, hanging up for laundry. I mean, it's all like the environmental, like what can I grab off the counters and clotheslines and what all.
And then young June gets saved by Father June in a surprise twist.
Father and son reunion. It was kind of sweet.
They are united in murder. It's an American tale as old as time, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, father and son united in the slaughter of people who may or may not deserve it.
Yeah. I mean, if Ah Sahm and Li Yong can come together to kill people, why not this father and son? And And just at the end, when Father June uses the gun to kill the people, he's like, "You're right. I will do some modern stuff. Okay, I don't have to be old school all the way.
I can update my look every now and again." He had a glow up.
Right. So we go back to Penny, and she is extremely reasonably depressed, sitting on the floor and lying against the wall in her black clothes.
She's collapsed on the floor and nearly catatonic.
Yeah,
would be a better descriptive term.
I really don't feel like that's a terrible reaction in this case.
No. I don't know if she could have gotten into that position with all the shit she had to wear, but And Sophie should have been hanging from that fucking chandelier. I mean, I wrote down at least 3 times in this episode somebody should have hung Sophie. She should have been hanging next to Jacob. She should have been hanging from the chandelier. I don't know where the third one is.
I'm sure we'll get to it.
But it is a shame nobody stretched her neck in this episode.
Yeah, Sophie comes to join her, and she's like, "How has everything gone so wrong?" And you're like, Sophie. But...
Yeah, Sophie, think about the things you've done in the last 6 months. That's why, you
but
dumbass.
She does it's like the entire world's gone mad, and Penny, who's been, like, stuck in reality for the last year or so, is like, nope. This is the world, kiddo.
Yep.
And so we go from Penny the realist to Mai Ling and Ah Toy. I do really, really love that these 2 women are working together. We're Chinese and they're not, and that's all that matters. And yet, But
it's not just them, though. It's Li Yong and Ah Sahm. It's Young June and Father June. It's Mai Ling and Ah Toy. It's really fun. Everybody's kind of teamed up.
Yeah, but the fact that they don't sort of do anything cutesy with them, it's just like, no, this is clearly a temporary truce because neither of us are willing to give up what has gotten us power. So, we'll work together now, but we're also realists. Like, we're just going to be real about this.
Yeah, and we find out that Mai Ling learned to sew up wounds while she was married to a warlord.
Yeah.
And if she got good because if she didn't save these warriors who were injured, she would be punished for it. And she says if it wasn't for his cruelty, she wouldn't have been able to tend to Ah Toy, which I found really interesting. And then when they went on from there, because this was a really informative scene for me. Did you draw much out of this? Because I learned a lot.
Yeah. I was just sort of thinking about the progression of bargains these women have made with each other and the hard choices that they've been forced into. Because you remember, Mai Ling was only married to this warlord because, again, she made the hard choice to marry him because she didn't want Ah Sahm to get killed. Mm-hmm. And so, like, it was just sort of this progression of these, like, hard choices that she's made. And she's like, all right, I've burned that bridge, or I've made that hard choice, or I've cut that thread to humanity so I can survive, so I can get power, so I can continue to be. And it's like, if I if I have any regrets about any of these things, then what did I do this for? Like, I'm nothing. So I'm just going to keep going forward. And Ah Toy's kind of the same way. I just have to keep going forward. I can't look back.
Yeah, she says we both do terrible things because we will never go back to what we were.
Right.
And I found that really interesting because as a guy who looks like me, I've never been in a position where I didn't have the physical strength to impose my will if I needed to. Not that I ever left an implicit threat, but just like my appearance is the threat. And I didn't realize that without a position of power, nobility is very difficult. Like acting in a noble manner. And that never dawned on me.
Really?
That like it is a luxury to be noble. I just thought it doesn't matter what position you're in, just act right. But you can't in certain situations.
Right. You sort of think about what they did.
And so this has been very elucidative.
Yeah, it's sort of like what they did to Penny, where it's like she had no right choices.
Or Ah Sahm. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is really interesting that Mai Ling and Ah Toy are very realistic, and they own their choices. They're like, yes, we realize we have done and are doing these things. Whereas Sophie's like, am I involved in this somehow? I would like to take it. Can I just say backsies now? Yeah. She is the opposite. She's taking no responsibility for this and is unwilling to see how she's changed the world and live in it.
She's the literal definition of a tourist, in fact.
Yeah.
She's like one of those people who goes to Everest and has 38 Nepalese people carry all her shit and then just litters the entire way and then says that she climbed Everest by herself. I made it to the top of
Everest. I'm very sorry I'm having to step over the body of this frozen dead person, but they're a native and, you know. Yeah.
Don't worry, I marked his body with a bunch of trash. But speaking of trash, we go from the makeshift Chinese hospital to the makeshift Irish hospital, which is Leary's Bar. And where else would you go with an open wound than an Irish bar? I have been a bouncer in bars, and I have helped clean bars. And I will tell you this. In the 20th century, people were drunk while cleaning bars. So I would imagine that in the 19th century, bars didn't get cleaned, but they were also drunk while they were cleaning them. So taking an open wound into a bar probably would not be my first choice. How about you?
On the plus side, there's some whiskey. You might be able to temporarily sterilize it. I mean,
I guess. You could maybe use... you could boil down the urine that's in pots underneath the bar because they didn't have bathrooms. They just had pots full of piss down at your feet, and they could have boiled that down and then used that to sterilize the wounds.
That's true. Yeah, that is a feature of 19th century bars and earlier that we haven't been explicit about. That you didn't go to the bathroom in the back. There were just literally pots to piss in, just in the corners and along the walls.
And I had completely forgotten about that, except that now I'm compulsively watching westerns, and I noticed it in Appaloosa the other day, so I feel very proud of myself.
Oh wow, okay.
In German bars, they didn't even have the pots. What they'd do is they'd leave little slits in between the wood panels on the floor, and every German man has a walking cane. And so they just put the walking cane in between their legs and piss down the walking cane. They set it so that it goes in between the cracks, and then they put sawdust underneath the floor, and they just pull up the panels, sweep up the floor, or sweep up the sawdust, lay down new sawdust, problem solved. That's how they do Oktoberfest.
How did anybody still have their nose on their face at this point? I mean...
I don't know how did we get here? We are here, and it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
I mean, I know that there are buildings in London now where you can see where the drunk men would piss against the building, and so the stone is like eaten away.
Well, they still do that at Oktoberfest in Germany. Nobody gets up. They never get up. You get your seat. You don't get up because otherwise somebody will steal it. So they just bring you pictures and pictures and pictures. They gotta piss sometime, so they piss the whole time. Yay!
Anyway, so we get to see Ah Sahm in his tank top.
So that's where these people are having their wounds treated while Leary is enraged at the fact they've all been injured by the evil Chinese. Damn them.
But yeah, we do get to see Ah Sahm in his tank top, or as the British would say, his vest, because they call vests waistcoats. But yeah, we get Ah Sahm is back with his nunchucks. So wow. Yeah.
Yep, he shows up with Hong and Young Jun, and I think that's it. But they're there to collect. Yeah. They're there to collect Jacob's body, and so he can just mean mug the shit out of Leary, just to say it's on. It's fucking on.
Yeah. So it's gonna be episode 10. There's not time in this episode for them to fight. It's gotta be next episode.
Yes. And it will. That is our fastest episode recap, by the way.
Yeah, there was so much just riotous fighting, and I mean, we're gonna go through talking about every cart that they pushed over, like,
yeah, I can't mention every person who was disemboweled.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a big damn fight, and a lot of it, but.
It fascinates me that a lot of this was just precipitated by the fact that we started growing wheat in the Midwest. It's wild. Like, that contributed to World War I and World War II.
I mean, Europe had its own problems, but yeah, the Erie Canal opened up the unexpected for sure.
The Erie Canal?
Yeah, we wouldn't have been growing wheat out west. That was sort of like the first wheat that we were growing in the West.
What is the Erie Canal? Is it in Lake Erie?
Yeah, it connects Lake Erie to the Hudson River.
Oh, I've never in my life heard of this. Does it still exist?
Yeah.
Oh,
You're from the East Coast.
I mean, I know that there are other canals in the Panama Canal, but I've never in my life heard of the Erie Canal.
Well,
and I live in Pennsylvania, or I lived.
I mean, think about Philadelphia and New Jersey. There's all of these like little towpaths and canals all over the place next to all of the rivers.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a canal right next to our house, so.
Yeah. And so the Erie Canal was connecting Lake Erie to the Hudson River. And so then you could grow crops, mainly wheat, out in like this big flat area out there. And then you could use the Erie Canal to get it to the Hudson River, to get it to New York City. And so
and it's probably also way easier to sail it that way than to go around like Nova Scotia and all that shit to get to Britain.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, there's an old song. I've got a mule. Her name is Sal. 15 miles on the Erie Canal. That you never heard that.
Never in my life.
Wow.
What kind of song is that?
It was one of those like work songs. It's got this really plodding rhythm. It's the kind of thing that you would sing as you were kind of like leading your mule along the Erie Canal to bring the barges along.
Oh, yeah. I can only hear it sung in my head with a southern accent, so I could really be an asshole and really southern it up and sing it just make up my own tune. I could see it, but I've never in my life heard that tune.
No, but it's like I've got
a mule and her name is Sam. 15 miles on the Erie Canal. She's a good old worker, a good old pal. 15 miles on the Erie Canal.
And it goes on, like it's all of these sort of like repetitive kind of drone trance verses. Just
so you don't think about the fact that you haven't eaten in 2 days and you've been working on a railroad for the last 6 months and you may die on this job?
Well, actually being on a canal boat worker wasn't actually so bad.
No.
The railroad songs were far worse. Yeah. the railroad songs far worse. But
the Chinese workers on the railroad did not eat well, but the non-Chinese workers did. Well, they ate not as well as I did actually an article on like eating at that time and focused it on like the lumberjack meals and stuff like that. But I also talked about John Henry and that story and the railroaders' diet. And they
die, by the way. He didn't die in the race with the steam engine.
Didn't he? Well, I know that he was a prisoner and he did die, but I don't. But I didn't like that was as far. This was like 10 years ago. I wrote the thing, so I don't know that all the information was available at the time.
Yeah, no, he the whole thing about him like beating the steam engine and dropping down dead, that was PR that the guy who invented the steam engine came up with because it made a better story.
Ah, that's cool. I knew he was an amalgamation because it was Paul Bunyan and John Henry that I used, like the two kind of apocryphal, larger than life people. And Paul Bunyan was based on a couple of different crazy French Canadian lumberjacks.
Yes. But we are sort of set up for next week with like, what the hell happened? They have destroyed Chinatown. I mean, obviously next week can't take place in Chinatown because they have busted up all their sets. Like, they don't have any Chinatown sets left.
They actually mentioned that they did it all in one big shot because they smashed everything, so they didn't have the ability to go through and reshoot stuff.
And so that's why I think the young June and Father June sort of like kitchen scene was kind of in this small space, because that's the kind of scene that you do have to do some reshoots on. So they had sort of an enclosed space. But yeah, I mean, there's carts flying up in the air, things burning, windows getting busted out. Yeah, there's no Chinatown. If we're just going to see Chinatown next season, they're going to have to rebuild it.
Yeah, Tom Weston Jones, Lee, he said in the extras that they actually had trouble getting the extras to stop rioting.
Yeah, even when you're just acting like you're writing.
Yeah, you get caught up, I guess.
Yeah. No, that was quite a frenetic episode. There wasn't like that much story to develop because it was a riot. And yeah, next episode is going to be like, what do you do after the riot?
Oh, I do have a little bit more information, by the way, on So Leary is based on a guy named Dennis Kearney, which is a really close name. The guy was alive from 1847 to 1907. Yeah. And I don't know this for a fact. What I do know is that Leary is set up as the head of the Working Man's Party, and Dennis Kearney was the head of the Working Man's Party. Was also an Irishman who moved to California for work, and he ended every single speech he ever gave with, "And whatever happens, the Chinese must go." Because he was imitating Cato the Elder, saying that whatever happens, we got to destroy. Yep.
I was going to say, and whatever happens, we must, burn Carthage to the ground. Or do you remember exactly what the words were?
Yep. And so when I had mentioned the Working Men's Party of the United States, that was the first socialist party in the United States. And it was founded in Los Angeles, and then, like I said, it became popular on the East Coast. But it fell out of fashion, obviously, in the early 1900s because Marxism became, untouchable. Right.
I mean, and Marxism is the perfect example of a bunch of people who are like, hey, living and working under the czarist system sucks. How can we make the world a better place? And then you get Lenin and Stalin in there and like, hey, let's go steal some money and blow people up. That'll be awesome.
It was pretty nice in the United States for a little while, though. I mean, they got us the 40-hour work week. They got rid of child labor. I mean, they fixed shit.
Weekends.
The socialists fixed shit back in the day.
Yes. No, and this whole thing that, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could live on the wages we make for, like, working all week? That would be nice. How about that? And for as long as sort of the working man was, keeping labor costs down by, all of the internecine fighting, the people at the top were absolutely for the socialists. But all of a sudden, once they banded together and they're like, hey, how about you don't abuse us? They're like, oh, we got to get rid of, you're not socialists, you're commies. Let's call them the commies. Yeah. And went to, start to break up all of these useful, helpful, thoughtful people.
Yeah, well, I think the nomenclature probably played a role because I noticed that they changed their name around the same time that the Working Man's Party of California, came into prominence. So I think they changed their name to distance themselves from a party that was originally about supporting the working man and then got subverted into just being an anti-Chinese psychosis thing.
Right.
But they got the Q law established where if you committed a crime and you were Chinese in San Francisco, they would cut off your Q. If you had been if you had been convicted of a crime and you died, they would charge $100 to ship your body back to China, and you had to pay it. Oh. So your family was on the hook for this. I mean, It was brutal what they were doing, but it was all the Working Man's Party of California.
Okay, and then the same thing is sort of happening with the prohibition movement as well. It starts out with a bunch of women who are getting together and saying, hey, I don't like to be beat up. And, you know, it would be nice if we could vote. And it would be like they were sort of coming out with all of these like sensible reforms, sort of helping the poor and children and just like how can we make society more stable? And then, yeah, a bunch of men came along and are like, hey, let's start up like incredibly punitive, poorly enforced laws just about drinking. Like they took over a good idea that was hard to explain and made it incredibly like directed and a way people could go riot for a cause.
I feel like more times than not, that happens with almost everything. It seems like what it's because when people are looking at something that they want to be able to do, they view it in the lens of what they can do as opposed to what they need to be able to learn how to do in order to achieve that thing. And then they get completely focused on the wrong part of the success, what led to the success of the original thing they're trying to achieve. And they just jam the accelerator down on the shit that doesn't matter and ignore all the shit that does.
And it often comes down to what can I say quickly and easily instead of doing sort of a breakdown of the economic I mean, it's sort of like, what was the cause of World War I? And I'm like, the Erie Canal. And you're like, gee, what?
I really liked that, though. Again, I can't believe I've never heard of the Erie Canal. But,
oh my God, my brain is broken. You'll have to look that up. You're going to die.
The only history course I ever got a B in was Indian history. I cannot believe I've never heard of this thing.
Well, okay, the one reason it does make sense to me is like when you talk about like where you went to school in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And so I can see how you would have missed that because they studied it the year before you got there in one place and the year after you left it when you were in another place. And I'm sure your American history study in school, because, you know, the Erie Canal is something I learned about like in elementary school or middle school or something.
Oh, interesting. I've never been interested in American history by and large because, you know, foreign cultures are much more interesting. I did my senior capstone project on the history of the Central Asian horse nomads. So, now you can see how all of it comes full circle.
It does make sense.
Yes.
Okay, well, next week we get The Man on the Wall. And when I saw that title, I was thinking, because we just had a riot and everybody's picking up the pieces, and I thought, you know, everybody's sort of retreating to their fortresses. And so I was sort of thinking of it in terms of like somebody kind of walking
guarding
the wall as being a guard. Once again, I am thinking too hard.
You went way past it.
Woo!
And instead, we have an impossibly fast mural artist.
Yeah.
And I'm from the city of murals, I know. Alrighty. Well,
all right.
What do you have coming up this week on the history of American food so that we can get ready?
Well, what am I doing now? I just finished up my episode on pirates and slavers and privateers and smugglers. And, you know, I am just moving through sort of the birth of the recognition of regional cuisine in America. I mean, the mixing up of the country during these early war years between 1776 and 1815, like this is the most traveling around of regular people that's happened in America so far.
Oh, cool. That'll be fun. Get a little early fusion food.
Yeah, because up until now, you emigrated somewhere. And I mean, the rich people moved around, but everybody else, you emigrate somewhere, you build your house, and Dad, you just stay there. That's just where you are. And all of this
is where I am now. I was born here, and I'm gonna die here.
Yeah, and all this war and adventure, caused everybody to move around again. You know, stir the pot. So we get regional cuisine. Everybody's aware of it. Like, whoa,
go super nomads.
All right. Well, what are you up to on the internets these days?
I have, so I go through these periods where I try not to, I don't say anything about it, but I don't post about any white men for a while. It's been an experiment of mine. And it's an experiment that has yielded one result. People don't like posts that are not about white men, which is very strange. But especially females from the 19th century, there's now some, antipathy towards them. I don't understand it.
Well, they're scary strong. I mean, when you remind dudes that women hauling around 50 pounds grain sack was like a regular thing, they're like, no. See those dresses that they were wearing? You're like, fashion plates are fashion plates. Like, the fashion magazine always had the scrawny models. Come on.
Well, I posted about this woman, Marie Jensen, yesterday, just super quick, who was a star of vaudeville and Broadway, and she was a comedian, but you can see her she's got her arms crossed like an old school boxer, flexing her biceps, she's wearing a sleeveless shirt, and she was a badass swordswoman. She performed with, his last name was Forrest. But he was also a badass swordsman, a pugilist who was an amateur boxer and stuff. And the two of them did all these crazy action scenes. And then when they get off stage, people would always, because, they were underclass, people would always fuck with them. And so the two of them would just be like Ah Sahm and Li Yong, back to back, trashing people in taverns. So Marie Jensen is just a fun person from history that I love. All the actors and actresses of that era were so badass because they had to live hard, and it's just fun to read their stories.
The adventure books and the adventure movies that haven't been written about these people, you know what? Enough with the superheroes. Let's do all these real life interesting people who the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, that needs to be expanded 1,000 times.
Yeah. Maybe we should we need to come up with an Avengers of the 1800s.
Right,
like you and I need to come up with an Avengers of the 1800s. I think that's our homework.
Yes. And I think they'll be more fun because all of these people lived hard and they were messy, messy people.
Yes. And that's way more fun than Boy Scouts.
Yes. All right. So we will be back next week for the season finale of Warrior, Man on the Wall, and it's going to be something. You'll get your fight.
It is Leary versus Ah Sahm. Here we go.
All right. See you next week.
See you guys.
All right. Bye. We're on Instagram at PCG Podcast, and you can always reach out to us by email at pcgpodcasters@gmail.com. And you can find more dope beats like this one from royalraven.com.